Earlier this week, Mr. Bokus, our cat, who has been here at the castle and was friend to many, passed on. Many of you know this story, and the experience I had, it's not the first experience I've ever had with death. Certainly not one of our mascots and little friends here at the Cast Castle. But I was there with Mr. Bokus as he laid in the grass and finally passed, and there was this moment that made me think. It was as though his spirit, soul, or energy, or whatever, had left his body before he actually died. And I know that science would likely tell me, what you were witnessing was the collapse of higher brain function as his body went into an emergency shutdown mode to protect its internal organs or something like this. But whatever that may be, I certainly do believe in a soul. I do believe in God. I don't know if cats have souls or go to heaven or anything like that. But I saw this article in the Daily Mail titled "The Truth About the Death Stare. Hospice Nurse Lifts the Lid on Phenomenon That Signals a Person is Going to Pass Away." And reading this, it was really interesting. I'll give you the simple version. The story of an old man in the room as, he's talking to loved ones and he's terminal. And he immediately looks to a portion of the room and begins smiling. And I believe they even mentioned at one point talking as if talking to someone. Some of these stories she mentions that the old man claims he was talking to a loved one or seeing Jesus. It seems like many people have different kinds of experiences. I'm sure the secular individuals of the world would like to simply argue it's science. When you're dying, your brain dumps DMT into your system, you begin hallucinating and it eases the process or something like that. I don't know. But I certainly do believe that there is something well beyond whatever it is we exist in today. And I think it's foolish to simply think that this is the end-all, be-all of the universe, of conscious experience, and what we are. Perhaps when we die, we join the great beyond, the great significant energy of other. I don't know. Maybe all souls are but little tendrils of the same being experiencing the world, and when we die, we become part of the one once again. I don't know. Maybe we go to heaven. You're on a cloud with a bunch of people that you grew up with, and they're all there, and everyone's happy. Maybe. What I can tell you is this. Mr. Bokus was our cat, and we also had Roberto Jr. Roberto Jr. was the first to be born of the original batch of chickens from Chicken City. And so we knew when he was born that he had a bent toe, and when he was first trying to crow, when he was getting old enough, he would collapse. And so we knew there was kind of something wrong. And unfortunately, he did not live that long before suffering a heart attack. I think it was only just over a year old. But he did have kids. He suffered a heart attack and died. Seriously, roosters can have heart attacks, and it's really sad. I was not there when he died. I was there. I didn't witness it happen. I was there when, shortly after, and we were all shocked by it. With Mr. Bokus, we knew that he was not going to be around much longer. December of 2022, he began passing out. He was still a healthy weight, but he would fall over. His kidneys weren't functioning properly. They were beginning to die. And the issue was they were underdeveloped, too small. And so his adult body had his kidneys working overtime to do the work required to sustain him. And so they actually told us to put him down in December of 2022. They said, why don't we just put him down now? And I was like, what? Are you nuts? Like, he's fine. He's walking around. He's doing his thing. He just needs medicine or something. We tried everything. He couldn't get a kidney transplant. He also had a defective heart. As a street cat, he had some defects from development and likely malnourishment and other things like that. And so there's nothing more we can do. We tried stem cells, but his kidneys were just too small and he couldn't get a transplant because his heart was bad. So we knew it was going to happen. Monday night, we knew he was unwell. Monday morning, I knew he was unwell. And I believe that it was obvious he entered total renal failure as you could smell it on him. Just near instantly, his kidneys had shut down. And so Tuesday morning, we brought him outside. I laid him in the grass in the sun. He was unable to move. He had completely lost all ability to move. And this is the point of the story and what I'm reading about with this phenomenon is it reaffirms to me that there is something beyond all of this. I was sitting with Kara and we were watching Mr. Bokus slightly curled over, and he was looking at the chickens and he was sniffing and he seemed really interested. We were happy to give him a view of the chickens one last time. He always wanted to go outside, but he was too weak. We brought him outside once and he collapsed and, pissed himself. And we were like, he can't. It's like he's barely alive. He's struggling. But this was it. So we laid him in the grass. At some point, his body went straight He no longer was looking out at the chickens. He looked up, his eyes blank. And that was it. He was still lightly breathing, but it was like whatever he was gone. They wanted us to put him down. They wanted us to bring him in a cold, sterile environment and inject him. And I was like, no way. We laid him in the grass and gave him a send-off. We brought him, we dug a little hole. We buried him at Freedomistan and gave him a little funeral. Everyone laughed and remembered all the things that he did. And he's just a cat. I know, not a person. But seeing this story, and I should probably read into it a little bit, it just made me think about the experiences we have and signs that there is something else. There's a show called Dead Like Me that was on 20 years ago. And I think it was 20 years ago. It's about people who are basically Grim Reapers. They ferry souls to the other side. But you're supposed to take your soul from your body before you die. You don't experience death. And that's what it kind of felt like. I was watching Mr. Bokus lay there looking at the chickens, and then all of a sudden he went rigid. His eyes stopped focusing, and he was just gone. Non-responsive, he was still breathing. His heart was still beating, but he wasn't there anymore. Again, science would probably just be like, well, when the higher brain function ceases, and I'm like, well, maybe that's it. Call it whatever you want. Whatever it is that makes us who we are was gone before he actually died. Crazy. In this story, a hospice nurse talks about the death stare. It's interesting. If you're not familiar with end-of-life phenomena, there's a few things that happen at the end of most people's lives. One of those things is called the death stare, which is when someone gets really fixated on a certain part of the room, and no matter what you do, you can snap your finger right in front of their face and they will not move their gaze. Sometimes they just stare. Sometimes they will talk to someone who you don't see. Sometimes they'll have a big smile on their face, like they're seeing something that's obviously making them very happy. That's called the death stare. Here's a question I have. Many would argue that we know. When you die, your brain releases large amounts of DMT. What is that? Dimethyltryptamine? Is that what DMT is? Let me make sure I get that. Let me get that right. Is it dimethyltryptamine? Hey, I got it right. How about that? I'm not. Everybody knows DMT because we've all listened to Joe Rogan, right? And because of the DMT that's released into your brain, you hallucinate right before you die. That's all it is. Nothing more, nothing less. So my question is this. What is the evolutionary advantage conferred to a person through this end-of-life tripping process? Why does it exist? Now, one might argue that for no reason at all. Some things just happen. Evolution. So we adapt, we change over time. Some don't believe in it. Some believe it's micro, not macro. I certainly believe in evolution. It makes a lot of sense. The platypus is certainly an interesting creature, I will add. Maybe we are a product of creation, whatever. But certainly, evolution then would be limited by only the ages in which you can reproduce. That is to say, anything that happens after the age of which someone could reproduce would not be altered or conferred through. It wouldn't matter. There's no reason for it. Let me put it this way. If the average age of reproduction in an animal is 1 year, then everything that the animal goes through in that first year is what will be selected for. And everything after its ability to reproduce, let's say at 5 years, so it's between 1 year and 5 years. After 5 years, the animal no longer has the ability to reproduce. If something happens to it, it cannot be selected for or against. Perhaps there's an argument for it being possible, I guess, but it already reproduced. So let's say an animal can reproduce at the ages of 1 to 5. I'm just generic animal, a goat or something, I don't know. At the age of 7, it grows wings and flies off and disappears. There's no way to select for or against that because the reproduction has already occurred. So whatever happens after that point has already now existed in the younger generation. When I look at what's going on with like the DMT in the brain and all that stuff, my question then is, how do you select for that? What could possibly happen in a young person's life that would result at the end of their life a DMT release in the brain? I have no idea. Maybe it's that DMT is simply there and this is vestigial or a byproduct, not meant to actually occur. Perhaps. But it seems strange just to say that's simply it. I don't know. I kind of feel like, I don't know how true it is, but I just feel that the closer you are to nature, the more understanding of spirituality you have. And humans have separated themselves from this, desperately trying to explain everything away. without recognizing that there may be things that you cannot explain. We have this argument. I have this argument. We certainly had this argument with Ian about God. And it seems like there are many people who do not understand the concept of extra-dimensional or universal or planar existence. I suppose in the instance of God, you describe it as extra-planar existence, meaning that beyond this universe we live in and its physical reality, beyond the multiple dimensions which may exist beyond our perception, beyond the multiverse which may exist within this realm, you have our planar existence. Outside of all of that could be something. Because of that, because we live in this reality and because we are intelligent, or to the extent we're intelligent, we try to explain everything away within the confines of this reality without realizing it may be impossible. I'll give you an example you can understand based on earthly reality. Video games. A character in a video game can never experience anything outside of it. And our science and technology exists outside of it, and it can never touch, smell, see, hear, or interact with it in any way. Perhaps we can make an AI robot body, and then a video game AI character could inhabit that body and then be like, wow, look at this. It's not the same. What I mean is, when it comes to someone dying and perceiving something that's not there, and maybe a person or otherwise, we might want to say, oh, but the brain is doing this, that, or otherwise. And it might just be like, that doesn't matter. Because there may be something beyond our planar existence which we cannot perceive, that no instrument could touch. And our only view into it is watching a person behave in a way that seems strange. But of course, it interacts with the rules of this reality, and so we justify it in some way. DMT was released in the brain. Philosophy, I suppose. There are many people who want to just say everything is within the confines of this reality. God can't exist because how could, I love this question. Could God create a rock so heavy that he himself could not lift it? For if he cannot create it, he is certainly not all powerful. And if he does create, but then can't lift it afterwards, again, still not all powerful. And my response to that is, can I program a video game in which my avatar could not move it, but I, as the game's programmer, could delete, create, or do otherwise? Yeah, it exists. Or as Homer Simpson would say, could God microwave a burrito so hot that he himself could not eat it? The answer is of course. Yes, but it doesn't change the fact. God does not exist within the plane of existence that he created. Certainly he does to a certain degree, but then you take, I find it interesting when you look at Christianity. They argue, why would he need to send Jesus and why would he send his only son? Because he's outside of this realm of existence. To inhabit this existence, you would need an avatar. You would need a manifestation. Duh. I don't know. I thought the story was interesting. She talks about a man who kept giving the death stare all week. His wife didn't have the heart to tell him as he was dying that her sister had passed. His sister-in-law was dead. Finally, she came to him and said, I want you to know that, my sister has died. And he says, I know that already. She asked him how. He says, she told me. I've been talking to her all week. So I have to wonder about this stuff. I wonder if we as humans have separated ourselves so heavily from the spiritual, whether it's religious or otherwise. We've become so insistent that we know, or perhaps because the fluoride has calcified our pineal glands, whatever. We now cannot perceive beyond the veil or recognize what's happening when it's happening in front of us. Or simply, maybe when we are getting closer and closer to death, the veil from this world to the next becomes thin and you're able to then see through it. I don't know. I'm inspired to talk about this simply because of the legacy of Mr. Bokus. That's about it. And then I saw this story and I thought it was interesting because he had the death stare. I was like, yeah. And maybe it's just he's brain dead. His heart and lungs are still going, but his brain is dead. I don't know. It felt like his soul left his body. The first thing I thought was something, someone, some force of the universe had taken Mr. Bokus out of his body before his body actually shut down. That's what it felt like. We can explain away everything we want. And I think this is why the interesting thing that so many secular individuals and atheists don't understand faith or spirituality. And I think for me, it comes from wisdom. Knowledge only takes you so far. Intelligence and wisdom, they're very different things. Wisdom is recognizing the limitations of our brain and what we think we know and what we can know. Wisdom is recognizing that things exist which we cannot perceive or ever truly understand. And that means we don't know what we don't know, which means certain things are possible. Many have faith in God without evidence. And I believe it is the young and the naive who would say, why, it's ridiculous to have faith in something you can't prove. For me, I learned this lesson as a teenager. With wisdom comes the understanding that we can't know everything. The phrase, true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. When I was younger, as a teenager, I was like, that's stupid. I know a lot of things. I know that this, that, or otherwise. These people think they're so smart. And then I got older, and truly became wise and went, now I get it. If we were ever able truly to know, that would be the end of the pursuit of knowledge. With the wisdom of knowing that we don't know is what drives us to try and know. And true wisdom is in knowing that as a human being, we probably will never know everything. Maybe perhaps we'll create an AI, which will be some kind of weird demigod-like being, and it can just know more than we can. But even then, it will be limited. And so I guess the only thing for all of us to do is wait until that day comes. And maybe we'll still never know. Because when that day comes, when the farm is good and bought, you'll be there without a thought. And so that's it. I don't know. Rest in peace, Mr. Bokus. He lived as long as we could help him live. Perhaps in the future, we will get a new Bokus. Thanks for hanging out. Next segment will be up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. We'll see you all then.